Hi, I'm Kate and welcome to my channel and welcome to my series on monthly palette use. So I've been doing this since I think April, just tracking what palettes I'm using each month, really to help me at the end of the year with my declutters and to make sure that I'm using as much of my collection as I can. I have a pretty decent sized eyeshadow palette collection, so I do want to make sure that I'm giving things a chance that maybe I haven't for a while, and really at the end of the year, if I can see that there's things that I have not grabbed for, maybe it's time to let that go. So again, this video is more for my use, but I hope you enjoy it. So this video's focus is my palette use for the month of July. Today is the last day of July that I'm filming this, so by the time you are seeing this, it is the beginning of August. August is a bad word for us teachers. It's like the Sunday of summer. I'm not excited that it's August tomorrow, but we'll deal. So the way that I go through these videos is I start with palettes that I've only used one time, and then I build up to the end where I share palettes that I've used the most. So I'm going to start with what's on my eyes today. I used this palette one time and it is from Pat McGrath. This is the Midnight Sun, which is the Mothership 6. We have an event later today, so I went a little more neutral. I usually go pretty colorful, but for events I try to go a little more neutral. So this is the Midnight Sun palette. I love my Pat McGrath palettes. I have not bought any of her recent ones. I feel like it's just a lot of repeated tones and shades, so nothing I need for the price that they are. The special shades in this one are beautiful. I did use this special shade and this one in this look today. They're super shimmery and sparkly, and I used this one time. Another palette that I used one time is from Juvia's Place. This is the Deuce palette. This is a beautiful springy palette. I created kind of a purpley pink, really simple look with this palette, but I loved it. I do love this palette. It's probably in my top 3 of Juvia's Place. From Odin's Eye, I dipped into the Verdandi palette one time. It's a really great neutral, warmer leaning palette, and I created a very simple neutral look with this. The performance of this palette is fantastic and I love it. A brand that I dipped into a lot this month is Nomad, so I think you're going to see 3 or 4 palettes from them, but I created one look this month with the Iceland palette. I feel like this still stands as my top Nomad palette. This was also the first one that I ever picked up and I'm still obsessed with it. I created a very green look with this palette. I love the greens in this palette, but there's also some really beautiful blues and warm tones, but I used this once. Another one use from Nomad, I did one look with the Whistler palette. Another beautiful one. I love this. I was gifted this palette from the brand and it's amazing. I did just like a bluey green look with this palette. You can go a lot of different directions with this one, and I chose to go a little softer with my look this month using this palette. Well, I guess I was on a pretty green kick this month because next up, another one-use palette from ColourPop is the Mint to Be palette, and of course I created a green look with this because what else can you do with this? I think I used the mattes and then I topped it with Fairy Fire from Divina Cosmetics, one of my favorite shimmers in my collection. I love this. This is definitely one of my favorite ColourPop monochromatic palettes. Performance is great, but I used it once. A palette that has made quite a few appearances in this series is the palette that won for my top palette of 2021, and it is from Blend Bunny. This is the Surge palette. They did just have a new palette come out, the Primal palette. I passed on it. I don't really need another rainbow palette at this point. It looks beautiful though, and I love Blend Bunny, especially their mattes. And my look with this palette this month was an all matte look, really focusing on the neons in that bottom row. I still love this palette, continue to grab for it. I did use it one time. All right, we're still on one-use palettes. So next up is from Kaleidos, and this is the Lunar Lavender palette. Now, I don't dip into this one as often as I should. I don't love purple eyeshadows on me, but this palette I feel like is the exception. Especially the shimmers in here are really special and unique. But I did a purple look with like some minty green little dots with a graphic liner, so this is one that I used once in July. All right, we have 4 more in the one-use category, so next up is from Melt. This is the Vita palette. I do have the Vita and the Muerte. I think it's somewhere behind me there. When I first got these, I thought the Muerte was going to be my favorite, and it was at first, especially the teals in there. The reds are super nice. I grabbed for this one way more often. I did a super like orangey red look, like really fiery. I topped it with the Terra Moon shimmer. I love this palette. I get way more use out of this than I thought I would, and more so in those reds and oranges, which I don't do a lot of red and orange as I have like orangey tones on my eyes today, but this is fantastic and I used it once. All right, next up, another Nomad palette. I think this is the third one on my list for this month, but this is the Paradise Islands palette. I did a blue look with this palette this month. I still really love this one. This was definitely an unexpected favorite for me. I like this way more than I thought I would. I got this for my birthday and I'm so happy that I did because I've gotten a ton of use out of it over the last couple months. Well, it looks like this month I've finally started getting more use out of my pat palettes because another one that I dipped into is the Divine Rose. And I just did a really soft look with this palette. This is definitely one of my favorite pat palettes. Probably this and Bronze Seduction are still my top two or my most used. This one is fantastic. It's great for every day, great for events and weddings. I just love this one. The special shades especially are just beautiful and sparkly. I used it once. All right, we're still going with green looks too. I did one look this month with the Black Moxie Pastel Obsession palette, and I also dipped into a couple Black Moxie singles to complete this look. I think out of my Black Moxie palettes, this is still probably my favorite. I absolutely love it, especially this shimmer up here. Mattes are beautiful. This is still one of my favorites. Next up are my two-use palettes. So first I have from Glaminatrix, this is the Nocturnal palette. I did two looks with this palette. One look I did is a very neutral look, kind of sticking over in these shadows right here. And I also did a really colorful look with like yellow, green, and blue. So I still love this palette. I still find myself reaching for it. This is fantastic and I used it twice in July. And my other two-use palette is from Cosmic Brushes. This is the Serenity palette. I think it's available again. If it is, I definitely recommend this. For the price, this is fantastic value, great quality. Did kind of a purpley look just this last week with this palette. And then at the beginning of the month, I did a really bold, like bluey green look as well. I still love this palette. This is amazing. Then for my most used palettes of July, I have a three-way tie between a couple new palettes and my custom palette. And I used all of these palettes 4 times each. So first up, I have my custom July palette. Now my custom June palette was really like rainbow. This one is just really colorful and summery, and I did 4 looks with this palette. The first look I did, no surprise, is a green look. I couldn't help it. I put a lot of really fun greens in this palette. Next up, I did a really pink look with like a bluey lower lash line. And then I did a more like purpley pink look. And then last I did like a pink and purple crease with a shimmery green lid. So really colorful and fun. The shadows that I used in this one, I believe the mattes are pretty much Copacetic and Terra Moons. The shimmers, I have some Black Moxie, some Glaminatrix, and I think some Divina. A little bit of everything in this palette. So I will get to work this week creating my August palette. I haven't quite decided which direction I'm going, but probably some more warmer end of summer tones. But we shall see. Next up is a palette that I've really enjoyed that's new to me, and it's another Nomad palette. Surprise, surprise, this is the new Provence palette. This is beautiful. This to me feels more springy, even fall with some of these like reds and berries and yellows. So I know this is a palette that I will be continuing to use as these months go on. But I created 4 looks with this palette so far. The first look I created was very like berry pink and yellow, and I really enjoyed it. This pink shimmer has almost like a blue iridescence to it, which is really beautiful. I also created kind of a smoky purple look, kind of purpley gray. I did an all yellow look, and then probably my favorite was a purple and yellow look that I did. It was really bold and fun. Nomad always performs well for me, and this palette was no exception. I really enjoyed using this the 4 times that I used it. And last up is the palette that my most recent video is on, and it is from Glamlight. It is the Michaela and Glamlight Part 2 palette. So I have the Part 1 as well, which is beautiful, and here is part 2. And I've created 4 looks with this so far. The first look I created was a super bold green look, very monochromatic. The second look was a blue look, a bit of purple on the lower lash line. And then I created a really like grungy army green and gold look, which is probably my favorite of the looks that I've created. And then forcing myself to dip into some purple, I did a very purple and blue look with this palette. So I used this 4 times. So that's my palette use for the month of July. Again, really using this to keep myself accountable as the end of the year comes and I do another declutter, just to help me out with what I'm not really grabbing for and really forcing myself to use things that I haven't used much to see if it's something that I need to keep in my collection. So we will see how this helps me as the end of the year comes up, but for now I'm having fun just tracking what I'm using. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.